Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I have listened to the debate with a sort of wry interest, if you like, because on the 30th of March 1989, I was actually there. My name is on the claim of right, and I think I can say I'm the only member of the House of Commons to have that honour. So I know about the Scottish Parliament. I served for 12 years in the Scottish Parliament. I was actually a committee chair. And I know what was all behind it, what was described by John Smith as the settled will of the Scottish people. It was to have a system where democracy was brought back to Scotland, whereby we had a different system, whereby the committees of the Scottish Parliament would challenge and hold the government to account. And Madam Deputy Speaker, what we have today sorrows me greatly, because for whatever reason, and because in Scotland the Greens are a wholly owned subsidiary of the SNP, we have an extraordinary centralised government where the committees rarely dare to raise their voices or to challenge the government. And I'm sad because I think that's dangerous for democracy. I don't think that's what John Smith, I don't think that's what Donald Dewar, I don't think that's what David Steele, Jim Wallace and others were about at all in the Constitutional Convention, on which I served prior to signing the Claim of Right. So when I hear the SNP talking about taking complete control, and when I see what it is like in Hollywood today, I have to be honest, Madam Speaker, and say I shudder. We have to repair democracy in Scotland first and foremost. And as others have said right across the chamber, what we must do now is repair the damage that's been caused in Scotland by the pandemic. People have suffered massively. My honourable friend, the member for North East Fife, has put it very, very succinctly. And to give you one example, I have a constituent called Luke Graham who lives in Wick. He knows all about mental health.
Jamie Stone, you are the Liberal Democrat spokesperson for defence and digital culture, media and sport. You're also the MP for Caithness, Sunderland and Easter Ross. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the platform.
My pleasure too.
First question I'd like to ask you, sir, is please tell us about your early life and your experiences working in the food, building, teaching and culture sectors.
Okay, I was brought up on a very small dairy farm in the Highlands of Scotland on the shores of the Dornoch Firth. When I was a little boy, my mum and dad didn't have a car or a van or anything. They had a tractor. And so, in a little farmhouse with no central heating. And so I wouldn't say it came out the hard way, but my childhood was not particularly easy one, although I had loving parents. And then after I left university, I then had a succession of jobs which were in stark contrast with what some of my uni friends were doing. One guy called Robin was becoming a barrister. My friend Hugh was becoming a chartered accountant. What was I doing? I was working on a building site, or I was working in a fish factory gutting fish, or I went and taught English in Sicily. And my career started along, whereas other people, and I think at that time, they used to say, what happened to Jamie? He got kind of left behind. But when I was working on my building site, I said to my dad, not sure where I'm going in life. He gave me a long look and he said, you'd be amazed. You're in the University of Life now. And your experiences, with working people and so on will do you no harm at all. By goodness, he was right.
Wow, that's really interesting just to learn just about your journey growing up. So following on from that, why did you decide to change from where you were to transition into politics? What inspired you to do that?
Well, it's kind of a sad reason, which is about my father as well. My career had improved by then, and I was then working for a Norwegian drilling company. And I'd eventually got on, a steady rise. And I was working out of Aberdeen. I came home one day, and my dad and I got talking with a friend of my father's called Sandy Duff, about the local football club. My father was a local councillor for my hometown of Tame. And they were talking about getting money to do up a football pavilion. And we were in a local bar called The Star. And my father said, I think we'll have another glass of whiskey. So while it's being poured, my father turned to me and said, I wish you'd take this all on. What? Within just a few months, he was dead. We didn't know it, but he got lung cancer. And then there was a by-election. And this is the real truth. Before my maker is the truth. I thought, gosh, I wish you'd take this all on. I heard those words. So I stood in the by-election for my father's old seat on the council, and I won it. So that's not the contemporary answer at all. I did it for the wrong reasons, maybe, but I don't know. I just thought, that's why I did it. I'm just being honest. So there we are. That's how I got in. And then perhaps just to take a little further, one day when I was a councillor, about a year after I was elected, I was then the youngest councillor in the Ross and Cromarty. That was the name of the council. By a mile, I was the youngest. And I met Charles Kennedy in somebody's house. And I really liked Charles. I thought, gosh, you're so different. You can talk to people, whatever. And when our host and hostess had gone to get a cup of coffee for us, he turned quietly and said, what are you going to do with the next generation? You're an independent councillor, which I was, say my father did. And I said, well, actually, I'll vote for you. And I said, I'll tell you what, I'll help you at the election. I'll put some posters up. I'll give you a hand. And then I said, well, actually, I'll tell you what, I'll join your party. And I went through that same day to Dingwall, the county town of Ross and Cromarty, went to Charles's office and signed up as a member of the SDP, as it was. Then, not for long, because it then amalgamated with the Liberal Party, became the Liberal Democrats. And that's how I got in. And that's how I then became Charles's chairman. Charles then persuaded me to stand for Scottish Parliament when it came to be. I'll stop at that point.
Wow, that's actually really powerful. I never knew that it was as a result of your father passing away. And there's so much. That's actually very noble of you to even follow in his footsteps and make a difference, just like he did. Yeah. That's quite powerful.
Well, I adored my father. He's been dead a long time now, and I miss him desperately. And the thing is that those two questions you're sometimes asked, if you wanted to meet somebody again, who would it be? You know, when your bank security stuff, it's par. Probably giving away a state secret here. My pin, as often as not, is his birthday, which I'm not going to tell anyone. So it's funny that. I think Jeremy Paxman wrote wisely in his book, The Political Animal, how very often the loss of a much-loved parent, comparatively early in somebody's life, can shape you and direct you and give you a mission in a way. There you go.
Yeah, that's actually extremely powerful. So what are some of the concerns of your local constituency? So for the local constituency you're currently the MP for, what are some of your concerns?
Okay. Prior to the COVID pandemic, I would have said securing high quality employment for the young. The historic curse of the Highlands of Scotland has been depopulation. People having to leave because there's nothing for them, going to America, by that I mean the US, but going to Canada, going all over the place. And you had little villages with aging population, young people leaving and so on. That was the curse. But then we had, in my own area, a yard where they built oil rigs, where I worked myself. And that stopped the people leaving, and people stayed. And they settled down and they worked in the yard with me at the height of that particular oil rig building yard, employed 5,000 people, which is a heck of a lot. And today they're my age, perhaps a little bit younger, and they've got grown-up children and grandchildren. So my mission is really to say, because we don't build so many oil rigs in this country now, is how can I find replacement, high-quality employment? That's very, very much my mission. And I entered national politics, Westminster, at comparatively old age. And I think if I do nothing else in the House of Commons, everything I can do that equals some jobs here, some jobs there, it is my mission. And good quality jobs. I'm not talking rubbishy jobs. I want them to be decent ones. And that's kind of what energized. And okay, one other thing was to say that connectivity broadband is a huge one. But I think now that we've entered, or hopefully coming out of the pandemic, I think dealing with post-pandemic is crucial. People have been under a huge amount of stress, people of all ages. And I think that's, that is very much going to be part of my work in the months to come.
Yeah, thank you so much for that answer. When I was doing my research on you, I actually realized that you're very much for the young people, which is really encouraging, because sometimes some MPs, it's like they can't necessarily relate to the concerns of young people, but you're very much, somebody that young people relate to.
I can't explain it. I don't know why. I mean, I was astounded when the young Liberals started this semi-spoof leadership campaign called Get Stoned. And it was actually extremely funny. I mean, they mocked up all sorts of stuff. Me sitting at Dominic Cummings' table in the garden at Downing Street instead of Dominic Cumming. They had great fun putting me on a virtual battle bus. And it sort of grew out of control, really. I had to say to the old guard of the party, this is a joke. Don't worry, I'm not really running. Because they were getting quite worried that I might be serious. I might take on Ed Davey or something. I don't know. I've got 3 children myself who I think keep me in touch. And they're quick enough to say, no, Dad, that's not right. There are a lot of issues. But also, just one other little bit is that I think it was a real lesson for me. When we had the 2014 independence referendum in Scotland, the vote had been granted to the 16-year-olds. And therefore, at schools or in all over this, you had hustings and meetings of people who wouldn't normally vote, talking about should Scotland be an independent country or not, or talking about anything. And I was really impressed by the standard of knowledge and the standard of debate, which I don't think in my time, when I was that age, we were as far forward as the present generation is. And I was really encouraged. And that's why I'm such a strong advocate for taking the voting age down to 16 all over Britain, not just in Scotland. And it's no accident that I've got my staff in Westminster in their early 20s. I've got Aisha, I've got Mohammed, and I've got Enya. They are so quick and bright at what they do that I'm sort of left awe-inspired. I mean, Enya's just WhatsApped a draft letter for me to a Secretary of State. What a letter. It's a cracker. And I think with the young, if you give the young their head, give them the chance, they can really amaze us all. I guess I'm pro them, but why did I mean? Goodness knows, I'm just an old bloke.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for such a good answer and for your continued work. On the issue of mental health, according to a survey by Young Minds, 80% of young people have reported some form of mental health issue during the current lockdown. What advice would you give to young people that are really struggling with the current restrictions?
Well, the only advice I can give is to say, and I do say this in emails, things is I get exactly where you're coming from. I completely understand it. I have known young people who've been in your position, so I get what you're doing. And then the second thing I say is I'm going to try and raise awareness of this at all times. And if you look at the sort of things I've been asking in House Commons, even with my defence portfolio, mental health has been very, very serious. And I think it's also my job to bring it to the ears and eyes of government that young people have had a terrible time during the pandemic. I mean, no normal school. Their whole life has been, in some ways, more upside down than people older than them, because they've been used, because they're young and fit, and they would be out and doing sport and doing stuff. Whereas old guys like me wouldn't be doing that so much, by definition. They've had a bigger hit. Also, their cultural basis, well, I suppose perhaps not online, but lots of other things have not been there. So my answer is, I understand your problem, and I'm going to try and make sure that the government hears about it as often as possible, and I'll try and bring as much pressure as I can to see if we can help you out.
Thank you for that. I was actually watching through some of your speeches when you were challenging the Secretary of Education and all of the other work that you've done on schools and all of this kind of stuff. So that's really encouraging. And
thank you.
And in 2016, you finished second in the Scottish Parliament election when you first ran to become the MP for Caithness, Sunderland and Easter Ross. How did you bounce back from that to get where you are today?
Well, it's such a good question. I'm not sure I can answer it. I mean, well, the first thing to say is that the only election I ever lost in my career, and that sounds pompous, but I'm about to depomp myself, was the 2016 one. I lost it. And I was beaten fair and square by a lady called Gail Ross, and she was a very good SNP candidate. And I think the first lesson is that sometimes it's good for you, I mean, I might even use the expression, it's good for your soul, to actually not always be triumphant, because it then forces a time of reflection. And and I think I was very lucky in that I took the decision that to be bitter was silly, and that to think no. So I hope I made a good speech, congratulating Gail on her win, thinking, gosh, it's the first time I've ever lost. And out of that came, just as this is a side, was that we have remained friends. And although she is still the MSP, the Member Scottish Parliament, for the seat that I lost, we have remained very cordial, and I like her a lot, actually. So what then happened? Well, I thought, goodness me, I'd better. I had become my career did this. It's all over the place. A bit like my career before I got a proper oil job. It's all sorts. So in 2012, after I gave up in the Member Scottish Parliament, and the Lib Dems were being trashed, I thought, oh dear, this is not good. I'd better try and get my old council seat back, going right back to the 1980s. So I won it back. And then I was in 2017 in the middle of canvassing to hold my council seat, my second council election. And my daughter, Georgie, called me at about 5 to 11. I was getting a cup of coffee from the baker's here for my wife, who's a volunteer in the museum. So I went to pick up her coffee. And suddenly it was my daughter, Georgie, saying, Dad, where's your car? Get in the car, put on the radio. You're going to hear something that'll be of interest at 11 o'clock. Never forgotten that. So I delivered the coffee into the car, put on the radio. And then on the news, and it was straight over to Theresa May on a lectern outside Downing Street saying, we're going to have a general election. So, blimey. Meantime, I was defending my council seat. And then the calls started from John Thurso, who had been the MP, from Willie Rennie, and saying, are you going to run? And I said, well, I got beaten last year. And the SNP held the seat with a pretty heavy majority. And there was sort of backwards and forwards on it. And I said, I can't. I'm trying to hold my council seat. I can't suddenly want to be an MP if I'm holding my council seat, And the party said, well, look, let's see what happens in your council seat. And I held it, and I was re-elected. And almost within a matter of minutes, the call started again. And I really worried about it. I thought, what are people going to think? They've just voted for me to be a councillor. And then if they discover that you're going to now want to be an MP, having lost the previous years as an MSP. And what was really interesting was, I got that one wrong, is that people, they quite like the idea of the comeback kid. They sort of said, oh, right, you're going to go, well, why not, Jane? And this, well, what about me being, oh, don't worry about that. Why don't you just go for it? See, you never know. You might get lucky. And I got elected. And I can't quite explain it. I don't know. I think I got a number of SNP people who had voted SNP decided to switch, but I'm sorry, I can't answer your question. Somebody, an American friend of mine who lives locally here, said, oh, he said it was the perfect storm. Quite what he meant by that, I'm not sure. And so I was genuinely startled to get in. And the party had said to me, officially, you won't win, but we would like you to fly the flag. And I said, well, okay. And my agent said, don't think you'll win. Numbers, you can't do it. And so when I got elected to Westminster, and I hadn't got the right kit, I turned up in chinos and a canvas jacket, and somebody who better remain nameless said, haven't you got a proper suit? And I couldn't find my way around. I kept getting lost. Let me get this right. How old was I? I was 63. No, I was 62. About to be 63. And I thought, what am I doing? What's happened? And my wife said to me, when I came back for the first few weeks, are you sure you're okay? And inside me, I was thinking, I'm not sure this is beyond my pay grade, because it's so big. The chamber's actually terrifying. And then, I don't know, I think a voice spoke to me and said, have courage. Maybe it's my mum and dad up there. And because I slightly delayed putting off I dithered about doing my maiden speech because, oh gosh, ought to do it. Big place, And And eventually, I think something inside me said, "Go on, just go for it. Go down." And then so I made my speech, and then you start to learn who people were, and then you started to walk. And I'm very careful about tempting fate, but of the last couple of years, it's become a natural place for me, and I find that I can stand up. And I think the day you're overconfident is the day you're going to trip up. So you've got to remember to be humble. But I be honest with you, the start was scary, and it took me a long time to find out how to get from A to B without having to, like a kid, ask a policeman, "Where am I?" They say, "Oh, Mr. Stone, is that you lost again?" "Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear." They were very kind, and there's one doorkeeper who was particularly kind. He's the guy with the white bow ties, and he's been a mentor. And he said at the beginning, "Look, work out who people are, because they tend to sit in the same place in the chamber. Quietly Google them on the mobile, try and get the face into your head, and work out which line people are coming from. Don't run, don't patronize the house, don't be arrogant, but at the same time, and don't be a slapstick merchant. But if you can now and again, lighten it up." And that was really good advice. He'd been there he's still there. He's been there for years and years and years. And what I've discovered, which is really useful, is the House of Commons does like a wee tale from the Highlands. If you think back to Dad's Army in Private Fraser, "Ah, mind the night, that was a terrible night with gales and storms." And the House, if I start off, "Well, Mr. Speaker, let me tell you about a pub in the Highlands," and the House goes, "Oh, Jamie, now what are you going to tell us this time?" And they rather like that. You can get away with murder, actually.
Stone.
No.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and greetings from the far north of Scotland. I would just like to say at the outset that I'd like to put on record my thanks to my excellent Speaker's intern, Mohammed, without whose patience in terms of explaining to me exactly what gigabit capable means, I probably wouldn't be quite so, hopefully, knowledgeable on these matters. Madam Deputy Speaker, clearly, I and my party welcome the government's commitment to speeding up gigabit capable by 2025, as the Minister said. But of course, that takes us to 85% coverage. What we really, really do need is 100% coverage. So I have to say that I still await something better than 85% coverage. Secondly, Madam Deputy Speaker, the involvement of private companies is noted, but of course there are areas of Scotland which are, how should we put it, less commercially viable for these firms. And of course, I would say my own constituents in the far north, Caithness, Southern East Ross, and indeed perhaps the Highlands Downs in general, might be rather lacking in terms of what private companies can do. I also note, however, that the government is saying that they will commit real money as opposed to private investment. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, you've heard me many times talk about connectivity in my constituency. I make no apologies for saying that I shall keep a very close eye and see what actually happens in terms of government money as opposed to private investment for making sure that the Highlands are not disadvantaged. Of course, Madam Deputy Speaker, at the moment we have a sort of mixture of, I've made jokes before in the House about us having 0G, which I shall return to in a second in some parts of my constituency. We have 4G, we have 3G, but really my point is that it needs to be improved right now because what we have is not really adequate. And I think very much that regional disparity is essentially unfair on my constituents. Now, I do welcome the Lord's Amendment number 1 in lieu of my colleague, the Noble Lord Clement Jones. And I would make the point that it's very hugely important that tenants and other legal occupants in exclusive possession are within the scope of the bill. So we'll wait and see what happens on that one. Lastly, Lord's Amendment number 3 is fully supported by my party. Of course, a review of the Act is vitally important in terms of assisting the impact of the legislation. But I understand that the government will not be supporting this amendment. I regret that. Madam Speaker, my main speech in this place 3.5 years ago was about connectivity. And it's a subject, as I've said already, that I return to again and again.
No, that's really inspirational because, some young people, they might have a setback or and they hear your story and they think, well, it might not be too late for me to achieve something I thought I couldn't achieve. That's really, really inspirational. And I'm glad that you proved everyone wrong, because we really do need stories like this when I interview MPs. It's just lovely really beautiful to hear stories like this. So thank you for.
Well, you're very kind. I don't deserve it.
So, your passion for the pantomime, it's just brilliant. Just how you're just willing just to get involved, and how you've played, the villain, and you've played the pantomime thing. It's just brilliant. I just wanted to ask you, how do you believe that the government can support creative industries in the pandemic? Because they're currently under threat because of lockdown, and because of it, people can't go to shows and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, okay. There's two things here, and I may be about to preempt a question of yours. There's no doubt that during the pandemic, a lot of people in the creative industries have suffered badly, and they've not been given support. And although there have been measures, but there's still some people being left out. And then you get problems that you never think about, which is that I remember a case that I heard about chairing the APPG as I do, of a lady who was a professional cellist, like a lot of hours to feed the kids. I haven't got time to practice the cello. And you think, oh my gosh, so you're being de-skilled. Because if you're a professional musician, you must keep playing, you must keep practicing. Otherwise, you can't, play the Beethoven or the Bach or whatever the way you could. So, to answer your question, I hope that the government will start to address these gaps, because we're not out of the pandemic yet. The other thing is that, I think that the creative industries are part of Britain. We make an enormous amount of money. I think I have a statistic here. When I see it in the handful. Yeah, well, the creative industry, which is, you could say, concerts and bands, and everything else, and Glastonbury and all that. £13 million every hour was before the pandemic was added to the British economy to it. So I think there needs to be a recognition just how important it is. At the moment, although I do think Oliver Dowden, in fairness to him, is a good Secretary of State, there is a kind of a mindset in government which says that the arts and performing industries, or things that make people laugh, or things like pantomime that get kids up on stage, these are of secondary importance to the great affairs of state, foreign office, home office, etc. And I think we need to get away from that. So I talk a great deal about the arts. I've just been recorded for the BBC this morning, talking about how the government needs to be underwrite insurance so that we can get events and festivals up and running again. Because unless you've got the insurance, they're not going to do it. And the insurance brokers are saying, oh, too risky. But if the government says, okay, we'll be the backstop. If things go wrong, we'll make, we've got the cash. It would help. I'm not sure I've actually answered your question properly, but that's sort of tasters of what I think has to be done.
No, you answered it brilliantly. So thank you for that. And outside of Parliament, you're a keen gardener. You like to do gardening. So how does it help you to de-stress? Because Parliament can be so stressful. So how does it help you to de-stress?
You're so wrong. Well, what I do is, and even if it's raining, it's a good idea just to get out. And I did it the other day. I did it 2 days ago actually. And think, your head's going buzz, buzz, buzz. I came out with my constituents officer. I'm going to take a walk now. I've got to take part in a late night debate from my den under the stairs, a bit like Harry Potter. But I thought, just get into the garden. And then you think, oh my goodness me, heavens above, the runner beans, last year's runner beans, what a mess they are. Well, I better get them down. In no time at all, where are my secretaries? Pulling it apart, whatever, and stuff. And oh gosh, this needs a bit of straightening. That apple, I need that branches away. And then you're lost, you're away. And you forget stresses. And then you walk back in, and you say, oh, what was it again that was troubling me? Oh yeah. And by the way, just to hark back to your question, the one thing that I discovered about doing pantomime is that you might have a stressy day, and this was really, it flowered when I was a counsellor for the second time. I started doing panto, well, where are we? 8-9 years ago, something like that. And because if you're playing a part on the stage, and you've got to remember your lines,
Everything else in your mind is wiped, and you think, yeah, it doesn't matter. I've been to a difficult council meeting. Oh dear, I'm going to make this decision about tarmacking a road. Hang on, I'm the baddie. And it cleans your mind out. And the other thing I would just say is that if you can pull off a good performance, I'm going off to a real tangent here, but if you can pull off a good performance, and the audience like it, and we play for X nights, so many nights of hundreds of people in the watching, and you take a bow at the end and you get the applause. I don't have any adrenaline rush like it. You think, I've done it. I've made all these kids laugh. Or when I was the baddie, when I was Abanazar in Aladdin, being howled down by hundreds of people. Oh, boo! And so I thought, this is crazy. I'm going to lose my seat at the council. I'm the arch baddie. But I've got off on such a tangent. You have to get me back on the rails. Sorry.
No, that's fine. It's brilliant. I just like it when you sometimes go and talk about other topics, because it provides the audience with a really human side to you.
Well, I don't know. Whatever, I remember when I was at Abanazar, and and he's he's the real baddie, big cloak. He gets the lamp from Aladdin, and you say, "Victory is mine." You see, it's reported to me rather awfully that this 3 rows back, a little boy burst into tears and said to his mummy, "No, mummy, he can't win. He can't win." Mummy has said, "Don't worry, he's going to lose. We'll see what happens." I thought, I can't have reduced a kid to tears. I felt terrible about that. It was the last night, actually. Maybe having heard that, I would have toned it down a bit. I was too nasty. I really hope I never ever make a child cry ever again.
Thank you for that. And
there we go. The next year was the year I was the Dame, and that's very different because you're ultra nice. And well, I had terrible trouble with the false breasts. They were absolutely huge. And of course, it's quite comic. No sooner do I become an MP, and somebody with social media, and it was only a matter of months before, to my utter astonishment, there's a picture of me in the Times of all newspapers as the Dame. And you can now find it online. And initially, it was a sort of sharp intake of breath in both the House of Commons and the House of Lords. My goodness, what have we got in our hands here? Quite common. Anyway, I don't mind. What the heck? It's what I did. It's true.
No, it's fine. It's brilliant. On gaps, you're the chair of gaps in support. So, who are you most concerned about in society that's not receiving the right support, and how does the APPG aim to address this issue?
Well, the ones I'm most concerned about, obviously, the pat answer, the easy answer says, I'm concerned about everyone who's missed out, which we are. But I think the more penetrating answer is to say that I think we are all most concerned about those who are most vulnerable, because there are some who can get through it, or who've got an auntie or a sister or somebody who could lend them some money to see it through. Now that shouldn't be. That's not right. But they will get through it. But there's others who haven't, and and I can't really go into details. So it's information that's between me and them. But I know of examples of people who are right up against it, and it's terrifying. And but for the food bank, but for they would. And I think one of the most harrowing ones was somebody said, "It's my little 2-year-old's birthday next week, and I just haven't got anything whatsoever to buy her a present." And you think, "Oh, Lord, this is just so not on." The gaps in support, by the way, just something I'm rather proud of, is the biggest APPG in the history of the House of Commons.
Wow.
Ever. It's I forget the numbers. I think it's got 261 members. MPs are members. It grew like topsy. It was astonishing. It was really quite humbling when that happened, because we started it, and then I was very determined to keep it cross-party. So very early on, I said, no, I'm not the chair. I'm going to be the co-chair with Labour, with the SNP, with some of the Ulster Unionists, Conservative, and so on. And I'm glad I did that, because I think it gave us a sort of a strength. across the House. But to conclude, our work is not over. The pandemic, we're not through it yet, and that, there could be a third wave. So we've won one or two things. We've got stuff out of the Treasury, but we've got work to do. And I want people to understand that we press on.
Yeah. Thank you for that answer. It's just really encouraging to see your work. I've been reading articles about the work of the APPG, Excluded UK, and you're literally holding the government to account for the people that are not being supported enough. So the work that you're doing is so important.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Although there was the most amusing times, which did make me laugh, was during it all, the theatre lot, they had a rally in Parliament Square. And what was the rally? Pantomime dames. Proper real ones. I was an amateur one. These were professional pantomime dames. And they were all in their kit. And there's one time I actually said into my office in Westminster, look, I could be quiet. I wouldn't mind dressing up as a woman, joining them. And they said, Jamie, you cannot do that. You're an MP now. I said, why not? No. You mustn't. So, I was photographed with them. To offer my support. But I was only an amateur, not a member of equity.
That's just brilliant.
I was longing to. It thought it would be great fun. I think some of the more stuffy, pompous MPs would have been shocked. My gosh, the man's a cross-dresser. Oh, dear.
Thank you so much. You were mentioned in the John O'Groat Journal and the Courier, because the UK and the government are currently having issues with regards to vaccine delivery. And you said that they need to resolve these for the sake of, everyone, really, and those living in the Highlands. So where are we now, and what more do you believe needs to be done?
Well, again, I've got to be careful about what I say because it's information I have to know. I have been getting emails about particular medical practice in the Highlands where the rollout of the vaccine is much, much slower than we would like. There have been allegations, I have to be careful my words here, that vaccine is not being distributed as fairly as possible. And these are serious, and I have to get into it and look at it. I think that the reason I said what I said was that the virus is no respecter of any boundary whatsoever. It's no respecter of any class, ethnic background, nothing. It goes everywhere. And therefore, whether you live in the Scottish side of the border or the English side of the border is meaningless when it comes to the virus. And I think actually that while the pandemic has been a disaster, a catastrophe, maybe if some good comes out of it, although I struggle to see it sometimes, it would demonstrate that we are actually all human beings, and all human beings are the same, and we share one small planet. And we've got to get really serious about health and about equality. My former assistant, Emma, works for the Tear Fund in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And she's quite rightly prodding me from there to say, as and when things are receding, could you please get your ventilators, any spare kit over to this particular country in Africa, because they're so poor that if the virus was to get in here, and it has, luckily not so bad, touch wood. So what I'm saying is, that's why I said what I said about the Scottish government, the UK government. Any notion of bickering simply because we're Westminster and you're just little Scotland. Oh no, we're Scotland, you're Westminster and you're the bully. Out of order. This is a total war against a killer virus, and it doesn't matter. I'm dismayed to read newspaper headlines about allegations the EU is fighting with Britain over vaccine and so on. It shouldn't be like that. So I hope that a new World Health Organization view on what we do, because there will be another pandemic, sadly, of a different sort. we've got to work together regardless of national differences to be ready. And we've shown that the scientists can do it, They've done some amazing things. And let's not rubbish the Sputnik vaccine either. I'm sure the Russians have had some very clever scientists working on it too. Jolly good luck to them. But let's all try and work together. Sorry, long answer. But I'm really passionate about it. And it's one of the reasons that I think that, to be honest with you, that all talk of another Scottish independence referendum at this time is totally inappropriate. We're not interested in that sort of stuff. We're interested in picking people up off the floor. We're about trying to put their lives back together. We're like getting schools running, about health running, etc. There are more important things than just squabbling because you happen to speak with a different accent to somebody else. That's no rubbish. I could use a rude word, but I better not.
No, thank you for that. You actually answered my next question, which focused upon the Scottish independence referendum.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's brilliant. So the last question I want to ask you is about, because you're a highly accomplished MP, you're not just an MP, but you're also a spokesperson for the Liberal Democrat Party. So what advice would you give to young people with aspirations of following in your footsteps? Because there'll be some young people that will look at you and they will say, when I grow up, I want to be like Jamie Stone, I want to be like this MP, I want to be like that MP, but they don't know how to go about it, where to start.
Okay. I suppose I would answer it at two levels. As far as I'm concerned, personally, and being incredibly, do not get this wrong, I am incredibly lucky to be where I am. That's why I couldn't really explain as to why I won the seat.
Mm.
You could almost believe in these things are intended, as they say, it was all meant, as they say in the Highlands. And therefore, I'm lucky. And so what I say to young people is, in my constituency, come and see me. Absolutely. You're so welcome. And, okay, I'll just tell another little tale, if I can. Are we okay for time?
Yes, fine. It's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Many years ago, I was working, after my father died and after I became a councillor, my parents had then stopped being little farmers and they were making cheese in our old cow byre, where it is still made by my brother today. And I was on my way down to London to demonstrate the cheese at a food fair. And I was on my flight going down, and the stewardess came up to me, at 30,000 feet and said, Mr. Stone, oh, how does she know my name? And this is for you, and handed me a note. What? So I opened it, and it said, come to dinner with your wife in the House of Commons. What? And the stewardess smiled. She pointed down the aircraft. I looked round. There was Charles Kennedy, who went like that. And so that night, my wife Flora and I, we went and had Charles Kennedy invited us in and gave us supper out of the kindness of his heart, which is typical of Charles. He's a decent guy, kind guy. Didn't need to do that. And I remember being so awestruck by the magic of it. So, wow, this is something. And I've always remembered that. And that's kind of why what I say to the young is, come on in, come on. And when they come in, yeah, come on. If they're below age, come and have a Coke, come and have a lilt on the terrace. Let's get a photograph. And so we love having the children, the youngsters in. And so I'm just answering to the local level. I'll go to the wider level in a second. But just one little anecdote again is we were walking into Central Lobby with a group of probably 16, 17-year-old Sea Scouts from Wick. And they were looking at all the statues like this. So, and one of these youngsters said to me, Jamie, or Chemmy, as they say in Wick, he said, will ye get a statue till yourself? Which is translated from the dialect as, will you get a statue of yourself? And I said, no, good Lord, no. There's no chance of that. And I just remember the humour of the, and it was a really charming question. So my belief is get them in, talk to them. On a wider level, if I was to say to somebody who's interested, dare to do it. Dare to do it. Write to an MP, write to somebody you know, just dare to do it. And you never know. A door might swing open. And it's one of the reasons that Mr. Speaker very kindly has let me have 2 interns. And what they try to do in the Speaker's intern system is to get somebody from a not so I wouldn't say deprived, but definitely not a background that brings any free tickets with it. Let's just put it that way, and to give them a start. And it's a lovely idea. It's a lovely, lovely idea. So they take, I think it's just short of 20 youngsters every year in an internship, and it gets them, it gets them involved. And I would like to see more of that. I'd like to see perhaps some sort of law ought to be passed, or some sort of agreement should be reached with MPs, that each MP will offer for, what should we say, 2 months, 3 months, an internship. Why would the taxpayer pay? Why not? Let's put a bit of money towards them and the rule is you get kids from backgrounds and from parts of Britain which wouldn't normally have the ambition to do something like that. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think you could do an awful lot of good. And I think it goes back to my earlier answer in getting the young involved, and the more young involved, the more we can get the House of Commons to understand the issues. And you referred to mental health for the young, can understand the issues that are big for the young. And remember this, and I'm sure you remember this too when you were growing up, a worry when you're 15, 16, 17, 14, 13, that an adult would dismiss is a massive, great thing in a youngster's mind. I can remember fretting myself silly about my exams at school. I can remember being, they're big monsters in the night that growl around at the back of a young mind. And we need to remember that. And you need to remember that, I'm way off on another of my tangents. But I think that's why it would be really good to get the young involved. And to say my 3 youngsters, okay, they're early 20s, but by gosh, they're good. They're a third of my age. Think about that.
Thank you so much for such a brilliant interview, Jamie. I really enjoyed this interview.
Well, it's very nice to meet you. I hope you'll come and see me in the House of Commons one day.
One day, definitely.